seems like no matter where I go, the rising sun follows. Something amazing happens there, where everything is ordinary.
We had a really good bike ride, really good time, but something...
Anyway, let's start off with number one reason I like Japan. It feels like a giant playground.
Because I've been on the visiting side, and I remember how amazing shit was.
If you don't speak Japanese, you know nothing.
It seems like everybody wants to go to Japan. At this point, traveling there is a bit of a cliche. But I wasn't going there for the food or the figurines, at least not entirely. I set out to Japan to find something that's been with me since childhood. And my journey began in the most unlikely of places. In early 2022, I moved to Austin, Texas to start a new chapter of my life. I was seeking new ways to create and collaborate with others that were like me. I wanted to find out what it means to be an American, if anything at all. For the rest of the year, I filmed homeless people in the city, following their stories, documenting their lives, and getting to know them. I did all this while moonlighting as a sort of observer of art, attending local events in the hopes of capturing a new wave. Somehow that led me here to a burner festival attended by bohemians camped out for a weekend full of drugs and debauchery. I went alone on a whim, and as soon as I set up my tent, I knew I was in the wrong place. While camped out there, I met a few kind strangers and encountered some shady characters. In their eyes, I saw the same look I had seen under bridges, between the sea of cars on a highway median. It didn't matter if I was in Los Angeles, Miami, or Austin. Everywhere I looked, there were broken families, and I felt it would be a good time to reconnect with my own. So I decided to give my older brother a call, and after a long conversation, we started planning the trip of a lifetime to a land of shared memories.
Pokemon is popular. Just thought I would let you know that.
Beginning with gaming consoles from Nintendo and Sony, a new wave of art from the Far East began to take hold in the West during the 90s. By the end of the decade, that wave turned into a full-blown tsunami. For my brothers and I, that tsunami made landfall when kids at school started obsessing over these colorful creatures called Pokemon. Not wanting to be left behind, my older brother would incessantly call every card shop, Walmart, and convenience store in our area asking if they had any Pokemon cards left in stock, and each time he was disappointed to hear they had sold out. That was until one fateful day when we stopped at a far-off gas station that just happened to have a new shipment of cards come in. The anticipation of opening those packs to see what shiny, holographic Pokemon awaited us inside felt as exciting as Christmas Day.
What's going on here?
We want real hokey monsters like Billy and Arwen!
And the cards were just the beginning. Pretty soon, the Pokemon video games were released, and I got my very first game with Pokemon Yellow version.
Pocket Monster.
While we were still captivated by the world of Pokemon, our favorite channel, Cartoon Network, began airing a new show that would change the way we watch TV forever. Dragon Ball Z had everything a boy could want: martial arts, space aliens, energy blasts, and badass characters. We had never seen anything like it before, and it was the coolest thing ever. When I saw Goku turn Super Saiyan for the first time, I wanted to be just like him, and I wasn't alone.
The show the Wall Street Journal calls a huge cartoon hit.
Who's laughing now?
Cartoon Network has a new #1 show.
DBZ got us hooked on watching anime, and from that point on, there was no turning back. Soon, we discovered a special programming block that aired late at night called Adult Swim.
All kids out of the pool for Adult Swim. All kids out.
These weren't just innocent little cartoons, they were anime, which means there might be some violence. You might hear some swear words, maybe even see some scantily clad women. Who knows? But when that TV 14 icon came up in the top right, you knew you were in for a wild ride.
Adult Swim. All kids out of the pool.
At the time, I was too young to understand the mature themes and complex characters in these shows, but I stayed up every Saturday night to watch them. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but there was something special about anime that kept me coming back week after week, year after year, until eventually I became an adult myself.
It's the world of Pokemon.
Anime and games have influenced every aspect of my life, from the videos I've created to the friends I've made along the way, and I wanted to find out why. Why does this distant island nation have such a profound impact on me and millions of others around the world? And beneath all of it, what does the true face of Japan look like? To answer these questions, I knew I had to go to the source, so I invited my brothers to join me. At the last minute, my cousins tagged along too. They didn't really grow up with anime, as far as I know, but they just wanted to visit Japan with us. So together, we formed a band of Armenian Americans. It felt like my whole life was leading up to this trip, and all signs were pointing me towards the east, where everything I wanted would be found in one piece.
情報をお願いすることがございます。シートポケットに入っております安全のしおりをご覧いただき、緊急時お手伝いいただきましまして、すべてのサービスを終了とさせていただきます。
It's a rainy day here in Tokyo. Just got out of the room. It's about 8:30 a.m. We're gonna go get some of those famous fluffy pancakes. It's hard to know where to begin when discussing Japan, so I'm going to share some of what I observed and what I learned about their culture while I was there. Like many outsiders, I've heard a lot about Japan by watching videos over the years. I've heard the cities are safe, the streets are clean, and the people are respectful. But none of that could prepare me for what it was like to actually experience Japan in person. Our journey begins in Tokyo, where some 40 million people, about a third of Japan's population, live in close proximity. The first thing you learn when in Japan is that everything runs on a system and everyone has their place within the system, except you. To make the most out of their limited space, the Japanese built their cities vertically, often stacking many different stores and restaurants on top of each other in the same building. I was expecting Tokyo to be full of towering skyscrapers in every direction, much like Manhattan. But by contrast, the Tokyo skyline is far more spread out, and while it does have many tall buildings, most of them are capped at 30 floors. I learned that this limit was put in place as a safety measure against earthquakes, which are common in the region.
Okay.
It's really just a marvel at human ingenuity and what we can build when we work together.
Being one of the largest cities in the world, the vastness of Tokyo feels like it's within arm's reach thanks to its efficient and reliable subway system. The trains almost always arrive on time with few exceptions. But be warned, the system takes some getting used to.
What is this, Mike? I like it. It's chaotic. It's cool. Andrew, what are your thoughts so far?
It's chaotic for us, but it's organized. It's actually really organized, very efficient.
What do you notice in the people here?
that I'm in their way.
Yeah, I noticed that too. It does feel like
We're sticking out because everybody has the system down.
Despite being in such a confined space, I was impressed to see how plentiful cafes, shops, and services were underground. It's like a whole nother city that lies beneath the surface. After just a few days of walking around Tokyo, I began to see how different the Japanese vision for society is compared to the American society that I'm used to. The train system here takes you all over town and all over the country, so they have this interconnected network of stations that once you figure it out, makes getting around a lot easier than taking a freeway and having a bunch of cars. This sort of distribution of transport makes the city very walkable and enjoyable to navigate on foot. Walking and trains are the main modes of transport in Japanese cities, and most of the cars you do see on the road are service vehicles like taxis or mobile businesses. Japan's minimalist approach to cars on the road made me realize how car dependent we are in the US. Freeways like this are central to American society, and with them comes the responsibility of owning a car and driving every day, making the experience of walking or biking through a city an unpleasant and often dangerous one. But here, every road is designed with pedestrians in mind, and you never feel like you're in the way of cars as you are in most American cities. Growing up in America, car dependency wasn't something I thought about. I was just conditioned to accept that the constant noise and the daily risk of getting into an accident were part of life. But traveling to Japan has opened my eyes to how different society could be. In Japan, it feels as though every little detail is accounted for when it comes to city planning, and that attention to detail carries over into every aspect of Japanese society. For example, by designing cities to be convenient for pedestrians, people are always on the move, and as a result, they're more physically fit. Maybe that's why Japan has the lowest rates of obesity while leading the world in life expectancy. Another benefit of having cities traversable by foot is being able to experience a wide variety of lively restaurants, cafes, and markets within walking distance of each other. And did I mention the food? While there, we ate everything from authentic Japanese ramen to fluffy pancakes, and all of it looked as good as it does in anime, while tasting even better. And tastes like green tea. The mochi is very soft and stretchy. It's like eating Kirby. It's true that their portion sizes were slightly smaller than our massive American plates, but the food was so well balanced in flavor that every meal left me satisfied. Whether it's sushi that melts in your mouth, curry that's bursting with umami flavor, or cold matcha tea that has a subtle and refreshing sweetness, the flavors of Japan will take your taste buds on a journey of artistic expression through cuisine. This man is selling fresh sweet potatoes with a wood-burning stove on the side of Tokyo street crossing right here. Look at that. That's incredible. With 7-Elevens and Lawsons on every corner imaginable, going out to eat was a big part of our trip, which made me realize one thing that was noticeably lacking from Japanese streets when compared to America. You see, in America, trash cans are everywhere along with benches and tables. But in Japan, public seating and trash cans are a rare sight, usually limited to designated areas like parks. I also learned that eating food while on the go is frowned upon in Japanese culture. With so much good food and so few places to sit, we were often asking, where are we gonna eat? And where are the trash cans? From our American perspective, the lack of public seating and trash cans is seen as an inconvenience. But from the Japanese perspective, this is a limitation that encourages personal responsibility. By having few places for people to sit down and eat in the city, if you want to snack on something, you're forced to think about what you're carrying and where you're going. It also means that if you're gluttonous and irresponsible with your waste, you're going to stick out like a sore thumb. With such large cities populated by so many people in such limited space, Japanese streets are kept clean because each person is doing their part in respecting the land that they all share. After spending some time in the country, I began to see the ways in which Japanese society uses limitations to improve the quality of life. I also saw the areas of life where they have no limitations. When walking through an anime store, as one does in Japan, you'll find that most of them start off as innocuous, innocent even. But as you venture further in, you may find yourself surrounded by man-made horrors beyond your wildest imagination. Among them are depictions of perverted characters, prosthetic body parts, and all kinds of strange, otherworldly gadgets for the purpose of personal pleasure. Of course, this is only scratching the surface of what is a nationwide waifu industrial complex, where services like love hotels and rent-a-girlfriend are plentiful and accessible. What's taboo in the West is completely out in the open here. After all, it's no secret that Japan has a high rate of men who are single, lonely, and sometimes perverted. But I wasn't here for that.
Okay, so we made it to the 5th floor of this department store, and on this floor they have a bunch of gaming figurines, anime figurines, keychains, toys, cards. You can never replace the physical cards like this that are just beautiful and illustrated. Sean, so what do you think?
This is basically part of our childhood, and being a 90s kid or early 2000s, yeah, it was a big deal in America, I think, for some people back like 20 years ago. Thank you.
Pokemon had a big influence on our lives, even to this day. To this day! What do you think, as someone who never... What do you think about all this?
I've never used Pokemon cards, but it's awesome. They look really cool. Worth a lot too.
Do you see why people were obsessed with Pokemon?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
We got a few blue eyes. Yeah, you. Check out the blue eyes they got here.
As kids, my brothers and I could only dream of seeing so many rare cards in one place. And now that we're finally here in Japan, there's so much more I want to see.
We're here in Shinjuku. It's a rainy day. And this is known as the fashion district of Tokyo. Something I've noticed about the way people dress here is they dress really nice and very formally. People always have a lot of style and expression in their clothes here.
The streets of Tokyo are amongst the most densely populated places in the world. And while in these crowds, I noticed the Japanese move about with punctuality and purpose. It seems that everyone has somewhere to be and they all know where they're going, with no time to loiter around or mingle with others. Like many Eastern countries, the Japanese live in what can be considered a homogeneous culture. 97% of the country's population is ethnically Japanese, and interestingly, less than 20% of them own a passport, meaning they rarely see a reason to leave the country. The Japanese live in a bubble, and this creates a strong cultural identity which is reflected in everything from city design and subway systems to fashion style, right down to the choice of umbrellas. From its high-tech industry to its orderly infrastructure, Tokyo is a marvel of sophistication. But what I found most impressive about Japan is not how much they built, but how much they left untouched. Throughout the anime I've watched and games I've played over the years, there has always been an underlying theme that ties everything together. In the busiest city centers and in the most remote forests, you are bound to come across one of the over 9,000 shrines that have been built in honor of the nation's most sacred belief. Translating to Way of the Gods, Shinto regards God and nature as one pure force that connects all things through the cycles of life. Each day, people come to shrines like these to pay their respects through silent prayer, as well as written messages of hope and gratitude left behind on small wooden plaques.
You know, a nice part of Japan with the shrine and the trees And it's like I feel like I'm an anime character, and this is like an anime.
Also integral to Japanese spiritualism is Buddhism, which was introduced during the 6th century by way of the Silk Road. At its core, Buddhism teaches that life is suffering, and the only way to persevere is by conquering oneself through the practice of meditation. Many of the cultural expressions we associate with Japan are rooted in their view of divinity. When you consider that everything has a spirit, as Shintoism does, you start to see the world through the eyes of a child. Across Japan, mundane things like street signs and subways are given funny faces and colorful characters. And suddenly, the inspiration for anime makes a lot more sense. It's interesting to see symbols like the Spiral of Life and the Triforce I've seen in games engraved onto Shinto shrines and Buddhist temples that are still standing today. But beyond the iconography, the power of these sacred sites can be felt too. When at one of these temples, surrounded by hundreds of people, it's possible to share a moment of almost complete silence. And in those moments, immersed in nature, I experienced a kind of stillness that felt psychedelic, transcendental even. Perhaps this is what they mean by way of the gods.
I'm not used to there being so much silence and serenity in the middle of the city.
When it comes to living a quality life, the Japanese have some things figured out. The first is that they have structured their living spaces to be in a state of harmony with their environment. Instead of viewing nature as something to conquer, they view it as something to emulate. And through the time and space they allocate to parks and shrines, they've also learned to find peace of mind in the moment. These are two things we lack in the West. In the America I grew up in, we cannot seem to be at peace with nature, and as individuals, it's difficult for us to be at peace with ourselves. I think there's much we can learn from Japan and other Eastern cultures, but for all the wisdom they have and for all they have figured out, there is still something missing. I was amazed at how ordinary everything was, yet extraordinary at the same time, like finding out that people jumping onto train tracks is normal. On the second leg of our journey, my brothers and I boarded a train to Kyoto, where we would be staying for a few days. Our cousins were boarding another train to meet us there later that night, but something unusual happened. Their train was delayed. Trains in Japan run on a tight schedule. They're advanced, efficient, and they're always on time. Almost. In Japan, suicide is the leading cause of death for men between the ages of 20 and 44. Its prevalence is one of the most glaring pitfalls of Japanese society. Death by train has become such a common occurrence that some railroad companies have even filed lawsuits against families of the deceased. With a high demand of hours and low chances of upwards mobility, Japan's workforce ties your value as an individual to the collective. And under this pressure, many who feel like they can't compete have decided to opt out entirely. Hikikomori, or NEETs as they are sometimes called, is a lifestyle of total social withdrawal in which one voluntarily locks themselves inside for months, sometimes years, without any contact to the outside world. Hikikomori first emerged in Japan during the late 80s, and they became more widespread during the country's economic recession of the 90s. Modern estimates now place the number of hikikomori at over 1.5 million. Burdened with the difficult task of reintroducing their loved ones into society, the parents of many hikikomori have turned to rehabilitation centers like this one. New Start is a non-profit organization that provides boarding, education, and skills training to hikikomori from around the country. Their goal is to transition these shut-ins out from their solitary confinement and into the workforce. Hikikomori may have started in Japan, but much like other cultural exports, the NEET lifestyle has spread across the world. Social isolation seems to be a byproduct of the developed world, where a highly competitive job market discourages people from participating, and a plethora of virtual outlets encourages them to stay inside. It's not yet clear if centers like New Start will take hold in other countries, but for those trapped in their rooms, having a place to collaborate and socialize with their peers is invaluable.
たちは人間マイナスイオンっていうふうに呼んでますけど、若者のことをガツガツしない気を出さない、そういう感性をこう発せられる場に出てきてほしいなと。ずっと引きこもりだとやっぱり辛い、ね、そういううまく利用してやっていってほしい、仲間になってほしいなと思っています。
As someone who's grown up on the internet myself, I've spent a lot of time in my room, on the computer, away from others. Looking back, I often wonder what my life would have been like if I never got into games or anime in the first place. But I don't have any regrets, as those experiences made me who I am today. And maybe it's because of them that I've grown to appreciate real life all the more.
So how do you like Tokyo?
Bro, I love Tokyo, and I love your channel, man. I've been watching ever since I was like fucking 15, bro. I love it, man. I love you, and I love Japan, bro.
I don't know if it was all the shrines or the slower pace of life, but Kyoto felt like a special place. My family and I decided to stay there an extra day. Little did we know, that decision would irreversibly change the course of our trip. While in Kyoto, I made some new friends. Aiden from Osaka University and Oliver, a journalist and grad student. Both of them speak fluent Japanese. We met over ramen, then we went for a walk through the historic Nijo Castle. I also met a guy named Olin who was traveling from Iceland. As I explored the city with my new friends, my appreciation for Japan grew, and I even began to imagine myself living there. Then, something unexpected happened. My brother Shant and I were out one night. We were planning to meet up with Oliver and Aaron, but Apple Maps was leading me in the wrong direction, so we were wandering a bit. Then, Shant decided to walk across the street to a nearby 7-Eleven. That's when it happened. Slamming on its brakes, a taxi collided with my brother, knocking him to the ground. I stood in utter shock for a moment as he lay there shouting in pain. From there, I entered a state of controlled panic. Immediately after the impact, patrons from the nearby 7-Eleven noticed he was hit and scrambled to help. While my brother was cursing him out, the taxi driver got out of his vehicle and gave us his phone number. The only problem was, he didn't speak any English. Up to this point, the language barrier hadn't been an issue, but that was in the big city, and we weren't in Tokyo anymore. Just then, Oliver called, asking where I was.
And then when I called you, you told me that your brother had been hit by a taxi, which really surprised me, because obviously that's not something any of us were expecting. And then this started a whole ordeal where medical staff and then later the police. So yeah, there was no English-speaking staff in the hospital or with the police. So throughout the evening, I had to translate over the phone. And then eventually they just called me to come down to the hospital to just provide full translation services between you and them.
While there, the doctors ran some tests on him and found that he was hit on the left side and fell on his right leg, which took most of the impact. Luckily, all of his bones were still intact. After a few hours in the hospital, they gave him a bottle of painkillers and crutches. As we walked my brother out of the emergency room, we were met with the taxi driver who had been waiting there for some time.
And the taxi driver came, he apologized profusely, he offered to pay for all of Sean's medical bills. And then we had I just translated between that. And then while everything was all said and done, he drove me home for free, out of his own pocket.
Not only did he cover the medical bills, he also gave my brother 30,000 yen and a handwritten apology before driving us back to our hotel.
Pretty good thing that all of that was resolved pretty smoothly. It didn't go into some long legal process. All of Sean's medical bills were paid, and then he was able to go home, relatively okay. Just probably more shaken up, I guess, psychologically than physically, possibly.
I hope I recover well, because I honestly like Japan and I don't want this one thing to ruin it. And I hope for everyone, the locals or visitors, I hope Japan is a good place, and that's, I can go on and on, but.
Although the situation was unfortunate, it brought out the very best of everyone around us. From Oliver, who stood by her side to help translate, to the doctors who gave Shant the care he needed, and finally, the taxi driver, who took responsibility for his mistake and treated us with dignity and honor. So when my brother asked me why he got hit by the taxi in Kyoto, I told him it was a sign from God. There's an old Japanese proverb which states that each person has 3 faces. On my trip to Japan, I saw all 3 of these faces. The first is the one we present to the world, a face we're all familiar with. It's a beautiful woman smiling behind a mask. It's the stoic businessman staring through you. It's also the face of appreciation expressed by the Japanese people. Although it's one of the most difficult languages to learn for English speakers, there is one Japanese phrase which is so embedded within daily life that even as a foreigner, it became second nature to me.
Arigatou gozaimasu. Arigatou gozaimasu. Arigatou gozaimasu.
Deer ですよ、deer.
Oh, deer.
北海道 deer.
Oh.
So tasty ですよ、tasty.
Sweet corn from Hokkaido. Oh,
thank you.
Thank you. Arigatou gozaimasu. Thank you. Thank you.
To the outside world, the Japanese are respectful and kind. The second face is the one you show to close friends and family. This is not a face the Japanese usually reveal to most foreigners, but it is one I experienced while there. As a kid, I was way too young to own a PlayStation or watch Adult Swim. I was only introduced to those games and shows because of my brothers. Sometimes I would sit for hours watching my brother play games like Zelda, Metal Gear, and Sonic. At first, we shared a lot of the same experiences. Then, something changed. My oldest brother, Andrew, started playing on his own computer, and he stopped playing with me and Sean. As the years went on, we played our own games. We isolated ourselves in our own rooms, and we grew apart. At times, I felt like a stranger to my own brothers, and when I tried to get closer, I ended up pushing them away. Sometimes I feel like I'm the only one who knows what it's like growing up in a strange place at a strange time, and then I remember that I have my brothers, and we have each other. As the proverb goes, the third and final face is hidden from everyone, and it is the truest face of them all. Many of the games and anime I cherish were things I experienced in my formative years, but there is one anime I discovered as an adult that has stuck with me as much as any other. While America embraced anime through shows like Pokemon and Dragon Ball Z with open arms, Japan was going through an economic crisis, and they were in the midst of a social phenomenon of their own called Neon Genesis Evangelion. On its surface, the show is about children piloting mechs to save humanity from the apocalypse, but its real focus was on the pilots who are battling with the depths of human sorrow. It is Shinji, the timid and self-loathing protagonist, who must face the weakness within himself to save the ones he loves. The creator of Evangelion, Hideaki Anno, once said in an interview, "In the process of making Evangelion, I found out what kind of person I am." And I think that perfectly describes the kind of relationship we have with our true face. Though the Japanese are known for being polite and respectful, the expectations of their society weighs on their shoulders. Internally, they are suffering, and the one place they can truly express themselves is through their creations. Like a gateway drug, one day those creations made their way to my brother's playground in the form of Pokemon cards, which began our lifelong journey through anime and games. The games I've played got me curious to explore the unknown. The anime I watched inspired me to create stories of my own and to share them with the world. At every step along my journey, these creations have shown me that animation is full of life, and going to Japan has shown me that life is full of animation.
Oh my God. 島福島福島日本酒福島福島福島日本酒ワンコインから
Whoa! Looks like an olive tree. Maybe a laurel bush.
I wasn't sure why I wanted to go to Japan with my brothers so urgently, but I knew we had to go on this trip together, and part of the journey is finding the point of it all.
Like when I see like how the Japanese culture is, I want to like cherry pick and bring some of it home that I like the most. And I really encourage like travelers to like wherever they go, see like try and observe and see how things are done better compared to their own home country, and try and bring it home and like implement it into their own lifestyle.
Kanpai.
Yeah, this is a strong one. Definitely.
I'm not Japanese, and I never will be, but that's not the point. Culture is a costume that we wear. It's an outfit that's always changing. It teaches us to learn the ways that work and to accept the ones that don't. Because the point of life isn't to adopt another culture, it's to create one. So if Japan has taught me anything, it's that life and art are one and the same. Hey, if you want to support me, you can follow me on Patreon, where you will get access to an exclusive video made of outtakes and bonus footage that didn't make the cut here. You can also buy a t-shirt or poster if you like this channel. And to everyone who watched, arigatou gozaimasu.